broadcasting live out of a basement in Appleton, Wisconsin. You're tuned into Fox City's Core on WCZR Code Zero Radio. We're the show that gives you an opportunity to call in and be a part of the show. Our call-in line is 920-358-0795. Core. Brett Newski is a multi-talented musician known for his witty personality and his knack for storytelling. He recently released a book, Piss in the Wind, Misadventures of an Indie Troubadour, which offers an unfiltered glimpse into the highs and lows of life on the road, filled with humor, grit, and heart. Please join me in welcoming Brett Newski. How you doing, Brett?
What's up, McNamara? Thanks for hosting again.
It's good to have you back.
Good to be back.
Congratulations on your latest book. I mean, that's pretty exciting. Now you're an author with 2 books out.
So yeah, I mean, the first one was like a just more illustrations, but this was like a way to kind of dive into the, what I've been doing for a profession for the past, I don't know, 12, 13 years. And I had just had a weird kind of unconventional start because I started my music career in Asia, in Vietnam, which is kind of not the recommended route and probably still isn't, but thus the book. Yeah.
I've got to ask you, this is the book right here. It reminds me a lot of the style of like Henry Rollins.
Well, Henry Rollins, I'm obsessed with Henry Rollins. Like, I've been reading Rollins for years. So that was when I stumbled upon his book. And those of you who don't know Rollins, he was in a really crusty crust punk DC hardcore band. And they would tour everywhere in just harsh conditions, and he would journal it, and he journaled it for years. So reading some of his stuff and how unfiltered it was, and just kind of unelegant, if that's a word, like the way he writes, just like, woke up, 2 hours sleep, played in the club that night, asshole threw a beer at my head, I begged him to come on stage and get killed, picked up the microphone stand, ready to smash him. So it's just like, I would love to see more writers write like that, because it's like, I don't know, words per capita, less words per capita. It's just fun to me.
So at some point you decided to start journaling. Were you journaling before you went on overseas?
Yeah, I've been journaling for years, since maybe like 2011, 2012, when I moved to Asia and was living in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Can I get a little more juice in the cans?
You got it.
And there it is, beautiful. So the book was just like journals from basically 2011 to 2013, and I went back through and like punched everything up, and obviously did a ton of editing, because I was working off like a lot of old chicken scratch notebooks and pocket notebooks from way back in the day. But getting up and journaling on a tour, it's always been a nice routine, and like one of the few consistency things that kind of keeps you sane.
For people that love books about rock stars or touring life, people that might be a fan of Get in the Van, this book is very entertaining.
It's the opposite of rock stardom, really.
Well, it gives you a glimpse into what it's like to leave here, because you left here because a couple friends were there, and you decided why not, right? That to kind of set the stage for how this book starts.
No, I didn't know a soul in Vietnam. I just kind of went there because I was traveling around. I was playing gigs. And I just loved the city kind of when I came through the first time on the performance on the show. So I was like, I got nothing going for me at home. My girlfriend and I broke up. My band broke up. I don't have a job. So, I was like, I'll just move to Saigon for a year, see how it goes. And it ended up stretching to 2 years. But the first day I got there, I bought a motorbike from this French Vietnamese girl who was leaving the next day. I had just like randomly started chatting to her at a cafe, and she's like, well, I'm selling this motorbike. I'll just give it to you for 4 million Vietnam dong, which is $100 or something. So I bought this motorbike for $100. The next day I went to go eat. I parked it outside a KFC, and I came back, like just plowed a chicken sandwich, came back out. The bike was just gone. And I kind of flipped out. I don't flip out often, but I took my helmet and I like spiked it on the pavement. I was like, fuck. And I heard these kids like behind me laughing. They were like, oh, fuck. And I turned around and it was like these 2 like Vietnamese, probably like 8-year-olds, and they were just making fun of me because I'm flipping out like doing a touchdown dance in a rage. so I don't know. I taught him the word fuck at least, you know.
There are a lot of ups and downs in this book, and I believe at that point, when that bike was stolen, you were riding a high at that point, and then all of a sudden went right to a low because that happened.
That's how it is. Yeah, morale's high. I mean, anytime you land in Saigon and you have 4 million dong in your bank account and you get a motorbike for $100, you know, it's a good day.
It reminded me, the stories of you riding through the countryside reminded me a little bit of like not of Dumb and Dumber, but of the same scene of you. I pictured you on this little tiny motorbike that kept breaking down, and you kept luckily running into people that knew how to fix them. The best part, though, I don't want to give too much away in the book, was the first gentleman you met that just fixed it and didn't want anything.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So I was taking the bike from Saigon to Hanoi, which is like a 30-hour ride. I was like, oh, I got a gig in Hanoi in 2 weeks. I'll just take a motorbike there. So, but yeah, the bike breaks down. Of course, I'm useless. I don't know how to fix it. So it's in the middle of nowhere in like a rice paddy field, and there's one like little metal hut, and I just push the bike up, 200 yards up to this guy's hut. This tiny shirtless Vietnamese guy comes out, and he's like, we can't communicate really. He doesn't speak a lick of English, but I point at the bike. He knows what's going on. He just like starts ripping the bike apart, like brings out a rack of metal tools. He's like covered in oil. 45 minutes, he like pulls up a chair, has me sit there. He fixes the bike in 45 minutes. And usually when you're kind of out on the circuit, on the travel circuit, like they see a tourist or a tall, goofy-looking white guy, they usually try to shake you down for, the tourist tax or whatever. But he was like, no, it's cool. Like, it's fine. I got you, baby. And all he wanted me to do in return was smoke a bong with him. But his bong was a huge muffler. It was like a car muffler that he had converted into a giant showcase smoking lamp. So he brings it out, he lights it up, smokes it, no problem. He's like the Snoop Dogg of Vietnam, just blows it into the air. And he passes it to me, and I light it up, thinking it's like decent marijuana. And it's like just gnarly, dry tobacco from in the back of the rice field. And I mean, it was apocalyptic pain. Like just my chest started burning. I was coughing. I couldn't breathe. It was actually quite scary. But he was like laughing so hard because it must have been so funny to watch. And his kid, who was probably like 6 or something, whatever, was laughing as well, which kind of made it worse. I mean, it was bad retrospectively, pretty funny. But we had a great time. We ended up hanging for like an hour, even though neither of us could really communicate. But we kind of made it work, and it was a strange moment, and it gave me a lot of hope in humanity, And
that wasn't the last time your bike broke down either. It
broke down like every other day. I didn't have my gas gauge was broken on my motorbike, and I never bothered to fix it. So I would just run out of gas all the time in the middle of like Vietnam. But there were so many guys who just made their living hustling gas. You could just break down, and within like 15 minutes, if you were in the city, some dude would rock up with like a gas can and fill you up. You just pay him a premium, which wasn't too much. So,
well, and you said you had to negotiate prices typically before you purchase something, because if you said you wanted to buy it, then they had you, right?
Yes. That got fatiguing. But I think after you get off kind of like the backpacker circuit, where kind of a lot of like the gigs I was playing were on, like when I actually moved to Saigon after touring there, like it was a different scene entirely. People are just so sweet and so nice in Vietnam. And it's like, nobody will really bother you unless you want to engage them. Then they're stoked to engage. I remember the big one was, they'd be like, "Hi, what's your name? Where you from?" And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm Brett. I'm from Chicago," because there's no way they knew where Milwaukee is. I'm from Chicago, and their eyes would light up. They'd be like, "Oh, Barack Obama, #1." And that was when like they were like the world really loved America at that time. Like Obama had just come in, and like people thought we were awesome. Now when we tour in Europe and stuff, I'm like, "Yeah, we're from the States." People are like, "Been watching the news, man. It looks rough."
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you went there, you didn't have any intention of touring around there playing music, did you?
Not really. I mean, I did have, I think, 1 or 2 gigs booked, but as time went on, I started getting weird and lonely, and I just had kind of too much time. So this gig in Bangkok worked out really good. it was put on by this British promoter who'd been living there, Matt Smith, who I still see when I go to London. And he's like, yeah, bro, you know what I mean, yeah, book a show for you, yeah. And there was like, I don't know, there's probably like 50, 60 people from 10 different countries, all smoking different brands of cigarettes that you could buy for $0.25, on the sidewalk. And that show is as gnarly as the venue was, and it's like we're just breathing smoke, playing songs. It was like really encouraging. So I was like, I'll keep doing this, and I would do recon on the internet, and I'd reach out and find like the DIY indie promoter in a lot of the big cities. And then we would set up shows in Manila in the Philippines, and Cebu, did a couple in Hong Kong. So it kind of gave purpose to the trip, and then ended up recording an album along the way, just with like weird makeshift studios I would find.
Yeah, you did record. You mentioned in the book somebody did a recording of you, and it kind of made you realize that you could travel around and do this.
Yeah, well, even at that time, like I had no one knew who I was. I could kind of put on a decent show at this point. I was still learning how to play by myself and kind of the dynamics of that, and handling like drunk, talkative crowds and that kind of thing. So, but I think too, just playing folk punk music or indie rock music as a foreigner in Southeast Asia was just bizarre. So people would come check it out, and not every gig was great, but a lot of them were. It's like I remember playing in this basement in downtown Seoul, South Korea, which is just like Super Mario Brothers on steroids in real life. But you went down this like 2-story basement, and it's like this. It looks like this guy's living room. It was called Strange Fruit, one of the coolest venues I've ever played. Just this dude had this like towers of records, and he had a little stage, and I played a gig there, and I remember selling like, I don't know, 15 or 20 CDs at whatever the Korean yen was at that time. I just had this huge wad of cash, and I was like, whoa, this is like, I could travel on this for a while. So I just kept booking shows and just kind of kept working out, and I ended up probably staying out there way too long and just like burning out and getting too weird and too lonely and too sad. But ultimately, like, I'm glad I kind of documented everything, because looking back with nostalgia, like, things seemed weird at the time, but now it's just like, wow, that was extremely weird.
How did your time living in Vietnam influence your songwriting once you got back?
I think just like, I just love kind of the chaos of transit, like, and I love waiting and killing time in bus stations. I love sitting in airports, like watching the screens as to like where people are going to go. And I think just like the impermanence of all that, like, I don't know, for whatever reason, it inspires song, travel inspires song, new looks, kind of new places, and just keeping like the pace of life at a sane rate. I've certainly moved too fast to the point where it's affected my mental health and stuff, but ultimately I think travel just like really sparks you, because you get new experiences. I'm fascinated by, like, you're at the airport and you're like, oh, this is going to Ethiopia, this flight's going to Cape Town, this flight's going to Yemen, and just like checking out all the people, and like I'm like, whoa, those are like real people from Yemen, and they're like like there's be like a mom wrangling like 7 kids, and she's wearing like this beautiful like shawl and this headgear, and it's just like, that's always fascinated me. So I always try to get to airports early so I can loiter.
And you found a girlfriend while you were there.
Did I?
Yeah, she's in here in the book.
I did date a lady. I dated a lady from Singapore for a little bit. Oh yeah, okay, now I know what you're talking about. So
it was a long time ago. So.
Yeah. So yeah, what happened with that? So she was a web developer, and I might have told this story on your pod, or I don't know. But she's like, Newski, I'm going to be working in Melbourne, Australia for 3 months. You should come visit, And I was like in love with this girl. I met her at this coffee shop in Saigon. So we were dating like a couple months. I spent all my money on this flight to go visit her in Melbourne, Australia. And I get there, she breaks up with me like right when I get there. And I don't know anyone there. So I'm just like, what do? I'm like walking to parks, like getting drunk with homeless guys, like no joke. There's this homeless guy named Cans. He was like this young kid with like a dirty mustache, and he was always wearing a hockey helmet. So I'd be like, Cans, why are you always wearing a hockey helmet? He's like, "Oh, brew, because then like I don't have to get a pillow when I sleep in a dumpster, brew." Like he would just take naps and like the helmet was a pillow. It was just so comfortable. So anyway, I was just hanging out with these guys going to soup kitchens because they didn't really have much money. And one night there was this show on, so I went to go see this, like, there's a show happening at this place called the Workman's Club in downtown Melbourne. And I go in and I'm like having a beer, which was like, I don't know, $14 at the time. And I'm talking to this girl. We're talking about like art and drawing. And I'm like, yeah, well, what's your band? Well, I'll come watch the show. And she's like, oh, we're called Courtney Barnett and the Courtney Barnetts. So I go watch their show, and like they took me out drinking around Melbourne, and they were real sweet. And I told them like my breakup story, and I'm like, I'm so depressed, you know. So I think they thought it was funny, and also had like, you know, a soft spot and kind of helped pick me up. But I got back to the States, you know, I don't know, 3 or 4 months later, and they were like in Rolling Stone magazine, and the band had completely blown up. So I actually kept in touch with those guys for a while, but then you just kind of lose touch. They're kind of in the stratosphere at this point.
I remember it's kind of common for people to say the next Nirvana, but I remember at the time people were saying things like, oh, Courtney Barnett's the next Nirvana.
I mean, she's like the female, you know, Kurt Cobain, but much more mentally stable and together, you know? I mean, you could argue that. Like, you can't really get bigger than that band in the modern era with like the internet and, yeah, they're great.
So did you have to hold back anything in this book or go back and edit any of your writings from the past? Or did you keep it pretty straight-laced?
I mean, it's pretty straight. I did have a buddy, JD Eicher, did the editing for me because I just wanted someone to go through it and be like, obviously for grammar, but be like, hey, do I sound like a dickhead here? Do I sound like a douchebag? Do I sound too puffy-chested? That kind of stuff. So, but I didn't make anything up. It's all real and it all happened. I gotta throw a jacket on here.
Because there are a lot of great things in this book, which I want to get into, but normally when I read past writings, I don't like know that person from back then, and sometimes there's things that I wish I wouldn't have written, so I don't know if there were things in here that you saw that you wanted out of there, like I'm not that person anymore, or I don't think that way anymore.
Right. That's a great point. Yeah, I read through it a lot of times, but I don't like. I think just like getting your skeletons out of the closet in public can be really good, you know? And I'm really fortunate where like I'm self-employed, so I'm able to do that. And sometimes I almost feel like people that are self-employed like have a duty to kind of like talk about some of these skeletons because people can relate to them. And I think it can be useful to people. Whereas like, you know, if you have like a really serious job or a corporate job, you got to be really careful. Like you can't, there's a lot of stuff you got to bottle up probably. So I think it's important to talk about some of these mental wobbles and just, yeah.
It is. You do go through how you don't want the cubicle death at for life.
Cubicle death. That's a funny term.
The book starts out there, and then you make this big life decision. There's lots of talks about wieners in this book.
Yeah, is that right? Yeah. I mean, a lot of my tour managers would like get naked on tour as like it was like a gag, you know. You're
at a soccer game or football, whatever they call it there, and there's that's one of the stories. But then there's also I did not realize you were a hypochondriac.
Big time. So yeah, we went to this game, and the first time I ever traveled, we were in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and we went to this like intense rivalry game with the Boca Juniors, and we wore. And it was like the most dangerous neighborhood in Argentina, in Buenos Aires at the time. So they're like, you know, don't go there. And we're like 20 years old. So we're like, yeah, of course we're going there, you know. So we go to the game and there's like barbed wire fences like separating us and like the players. And like people are gnarly. Like there was a fight before the game where I guess some dude died. It was just like a rival fight. But anyway, we wore home team jerseys because we thought we'd be safer. But after the Boca Juniors won, it started raining. And the skies were really clear, so I looked up and I looked behind us, and it wasn't rain at all. There was just like hundreds of Argentinian guys with their wieners out peeing on our heads, which apparently happens all the time there. So,
being a hypochondriac, you must have been a little fearful after that.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't like, we didn't have like our mouths open. But yeah, I was like, I don't need chlamydia, or what? Can you get chlamydia from getting peed? I don't know. I don't want that. So, yeah, I think we were okay. But
You talked about going to using the restroom there as well, and how people, the urinals were so full, or wherever the holes they were peeing in were so full that it was just like streaming out.
oh yeah, I mean that was the thing I think I remember most when we were leaving the arena. We were walking up the stairs, and there was like rivers of human piss, like inches thick, and we're like walking through it to get out because the plumbing was completely shot. So yeah, dudes are just like with their wieners out peeing in the hallway. It's crazy.
I was trying to picture what footwear you had on, if it was sandals or shoes, and if it was shoes, if it was like soaking in, above the soles of the shoes. And
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember exactly the inchage of the urine, but it was a lot of urine. I've never seen so much urine.
people have to get the book to read that full story, but you do paint a very vivid picture. It's exciting to see that and live that through your eyes without actually living it myself.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you, sir.
There's other great stories in the book. You told one on, I believe, a Milwaukee news station about Bonnaroo, was it? When you're
Yes.
selling cigarettes, and
Yes. You want me to tell you that one?
you can do a brief story of that.
I'll do it brief, but yeah, I can't believe they let me tell that on the WGN news, because a lot of they were cool. Like a lot of news stations will be like, you can't say the word piss. We can't have you on. This book is too PG-13 or whatever. So they were awesome. But yeah, I was writing for a blog in Madison, and I went down to Bonnaroo to cover the music festival, and I had just come back backpacking in Colombia, and I'd bought like a bunch of cartons of cigarettes to cover the cost of the trip to Bonnaroo. So I'm like going around the tent slinging cigarettes. Like I sell all of them in like, I don't know, 15 minutes, and I got one pack left, and I come around these like real rough Nashville dudes just like drinking whiskey in the back of a pickup truck, and he's like, "Hey man, I don't have any smokes. I don't have any cash, but I'll trade you this bag of mushrooms for that pack of smokes." So I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know. How many mushrooms do I eat?" And he like whipped out the bag, and they were like orange and blue. They looked like real science based, And he's like, "Man, you just eat the whole bag." So I was like, "Yeah, this guy looks like he parties. He knows what he's talking about." So I chowed the whole bag of mushrooms, and then I had to go work at the festival. I had to go to the media tent and start writing. And like I'm just sweating profusely, and things are getting real gnarly and intense, and the mushrooms started to do their work, And I came to, and I was just hanging out with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I had to look back at the program after I like slept in the tent for 8 hours, and it was indeed him. Like he was there promoting a book, and I was like, "Was that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar?" So that's my Bonnaroo mushroom story.
I love that because it's so random. Like, of all the people you can run into there, and just the whole thing.
Random.
The whole book, people should read it. It's really easy to read because you want to keep turning pages, and the chapters aren't extremely long. So if you're like me, and you like to read like one chapter and then put it down for the night or two, it's just a really enjoyable book, and one that you'll get through pretty quickly because you won't be able to put it down.
Chapters they only should be 3 pages long maximum. Any book ever made for the future, 3 chapters, 3 pages.
So your previous band that broke up before this trip, you were working your tail off in that band, and when it ended, it seems like you were lost. You didn't know what to do from this point on. And then you experienced being a solo artist where you were making all the decisions and doing everything. And then you did that for a while. Now you're in a band called Newski, which is a band again. It's the band dynamic. How's that different this time versus your first band?
Well, so I had a band in college called The Nod, and we had a really nice run. It was really fun. I was learning how to do everything. And looking back, I was like, I'm pretty happy with the stuff we made. I thought it was pretty creative and pretty good for being, 20-year-olds. But yeah, when you're in college, like you're just playing music. I was just really serious about it, and you played with guys that just are there to have a good time and drink beer and meet girls, and like I just wanted it to be more serious than that, so it just wasn't gonna last. So I felt like I needed to make a project that was like low to the ground and like very few moving parts. And yeah, so I just started touring as my own name, Brett Newski, and that's kind of what I've been doing ever since.
Since this book is your second book, do you have any music on the horizon to come out maybe in 2025? Are you working on anything right now?
Yeah, I've been making a bunch of stuff on tape at my house. Like I don't know. Like I still don't know what we should call the band. If it's because we just started calling it Newski because it's more of a band kind of indie rock vibe these days. But I don't know. Maybe I should change it back to my name. I have no idea. I used to be good at like marketing stuff, and now I'm getting worse with time. But yeah, what do you think we should do, McNamara?
I like Newski. I like Brett Newski too. So I guess not much of a help.
Yeah, call in. Just call in. Tell me what to do.
So do you have any other journals or anything that you're going to release?
There's going to be a volume 2 and hopefully a volume 3. If I can shift enough units, we can get a volume 2 going.
Are you still keeping journals to this day?
Yeah. I still do it. Especially when I'm alone on the road. It's one of my favorite things to do. It just like it gives me a purpose during the day, because there's so much waiting time before the gig at night, and also just like the beauty and like the mundane is just like so interesting if you like really write it down and kind of think about it and observe enough mundane things. It's like just, I don't know, being on the sidewalk in Budapest and like watching how these dudes like are able to just like, I don't know, the efficiency of how they work. Well, like how are they able to smoke like 17 cigarettes in an hour while doing it and eat lunch at the same time while like gambling and playing a game of dice on the sidewalk with their coworkers? It's like all that kind of stuff is just like, whoa. So when I see like little things that wouldn't normally be a huge deal, it's like I want to write them down. And that's kind of where journaling comes in. I think just like the fear of God was really struck into me early on in my like early 20s after college, because I was going around interviewing all these jobs, and there's like, what do you call it? The cubicle death, Nothing wrong with the cubicle death if that's your thing, like no judgment, but for me, it was just like freaky. And I remember like going to an accounting, like, what do you call it when you shadow someone?
Yeah, job shadowing. I believe.
Job shadowing. Which I had no business job shadowing at an accounting firm, because like I got a B- in accounting, and I hate math. I hate numbers. It just doesn't work. But anyway, this guy was like talking to me. He's like, hey, we can get you a lot of mobile upward growth in the company, and if you really stick with it, you can go places. And I straight up fell asleep like in front of the guy. Like I didn't mean to be disrespectful. It's actually horrible. But I like my arm slid off the table, and I punched myself awake, and I was like, ugh! And that's like, and then he was just like looking at me with his mouth agape, and I was like embarrassed, and I felt like an asshole. But I legitimately fell asleep in front of this like accounting overlord. So I didn't get the job.
How did you come up with the title for this book?
Piss in the Wind was a song I wrote with my buddy John Shaban. It's just kind of about what is it called? Like self-sabotage. One of the lines is, fall in love easily with liabilities, don't stop the heartbleed, and piss in the wind. So it's just kind of a funny song. I don't know. It's fun to fall in love with liabilities, don't you think, McNamara? It's like you got to do it at least once or twice.
Yeah.
They're the most interesting people, I think.
Did you learn anything from your first book that you applied to the second book, as far as either marketing, promo, or even how you made the book?
Yeah, I think so. I must have. I don't know. I don't remember.
Well, it's a good book. I think people should check it out. If people are interested in picking it up, where can they find it?
So the best place is newskimusic.com, because we can just sell it directly, but I believe it just went up on Bezos.overlord/Amazon. So you can get it on there. Yeah, I don't know. If you've read it, write it a review on there or wherever. I think that helps.
Do you read the reviews that everybody leaves?
I do check in maybe like a year or two after they're written. And yeah, I mean, a lot of them are good, because I'll just like send it out to the newsletter or be like, hey, what do you think of the book? Check it out. But then there'll be like one 2 really bad reviews, like this guy's gay or whatever. Like people are mean.
Then in that case, do you let that roll off your shoulders pretty easily, or does that stick with you and sting for a little while?
It used to, man. When I first started like getting, being in public or whatever, and like people would review your records or write comments on YouTube, like I remember like that was tough, like, but now it's pretty funny. Now I save all that stuff and we'll like read it on air on the podcast or whatever. Like it's fun. It's fun now. I mean, at this point, like I feel like I've aired out all my skeletons where there's not a lot you could say to like tear me apart on the inside. I don't want to challenge the public. Like, please don't call in. But I would like to think I'll be okay if people says my album is a turd.
Well, what are you doing up in Appleton today? Do you have business up here?
I came to sit in a hot tub. My friends have a hot tub, so I just sit in the hot tub, hang out with you, and then I'm doing morning TV in Green Bay tomorrow. So I don't know how that'll go, if I'll be allowed to say any of this stuff. But
well, you know what? You might as well just say what you want and see where the cards land.
is it live? Like they can't.
Yeah, it's live.
So they can't stop me, baby.
They can't.
I mean, it could be worth a blackballing, if the story hits. I don't know.
So we've got a question came in here just after the buzzer, but we'll get to it because Brett's a stand-up guy. The question is as follows. They say music is a universal language. Do you have a story where one of your songs or at one of your gigs in another country, they knew your music or they understood what you were talking about?
Oh, that's cool. I mean, so there was this tiny alleyway in Saigon where I would like play guitar. I had been renting a room there for a couple weeks, and there was this deaf girl that lived there. Her parents owned a little hotel, and her name was Mai, and she would come downstairs when I was playing in the alley. She couldn't hear anything, but she would put her fingers on the end of the guitar so she could like feel the vibrations. It was really sweet. And so I'd play and she would listen that way, and like we became kind of pals, and I saw her all the time. So that would be like a weekly thing, and that was pretty cool and like a pretty moving experience.
I want to thank you for coming over today and doing this. The book is great. People should check it out. Brett Newski, Piss in the Wind. Is that available on newskimusic.com, you said?
Yep, newskimusic.com. Yeah, thanks, Annie. Thanks for hosting. We'll see you around Wisconsin for sure.